Ever hear someone say like, I heard God say this, or I had a vision? Hey, I just want to really demystify this for you in this episode. We're going to have a casual conversation around this. Me and Chelsea have really worked on this area of actually what we call increasing our spiritual intelligence. It's actually a game changer that helps us in our business, our marriage, our life with our kids. We're going to share some really practical ways you can grow in this area of receiving knowledge that's beyond you.
And right now, if you go on social media at all, it's really hard to not follow other entrepreneurs and hear people sharing like the universe told me, or my gut, or my intuition, or I heard this voice, this knowing that I couldn't let go. And while I believe a lot of that, there is truth in that, Stephen and I believe that that's actually God speaking to you.
Now, if the word God is going to trigger you, that's okay. How many of you know that you can still receive from something that might trigger you or might offend you? I remember we walked into a conference one time and the speaker speaking was like totally not my flavor. This guy was just not like the type of person I would see on the street and be like, hey, let's be friends. Okay. He really rubbed me the wrong way in the presentation, the way he did things. But then I decided to push through that and say, hey, maybe there's some wisdom that he carries that I don't have. And I got a business breakthrough from this guy. And so as we go into this episode, a conversation around hearing God, actually getting spiritual wisdom and insight that will truly blow your mind. We're going to share some stories that'll blow your mind. And if you start experimenting with this, you're going to see some crazy stuff. So I just encourage you to go into this. If that word God is triggering you, I would just be open to it, because there may be something here that can help you, regardless if you're going to call it God or not. And I'll be the first to say, like, and Chelsea can attest to this, like, I was the most skeptical guy when it came to some of this kind of woo-woo out there stuff, but I've grown so much in it and I've seen it happen so many times where it's just undeniable that like that wisdom that came to me somehow was totally outside of me. There is no way that God can't be involved with that. And so I have grown so much in this area, learned to trust it. And now I would say I really operate very strongly in it. But I'm just telling you, like, if you're feeling a little skeptical about this, like, I've been there, like if your flags are going up right now, it's okay. I just want to demystify it a little bit, because I think there's a lot of religious people that use religious language, and religion can tend to be about like separateness, or like, hey, like, oh, we're holy over here. And, like there's something you got to do to like get to God. And it's kind of hard, but like, I just want to make it really easy, And so on this, like today, this conversation, we're just going to tell you how like we've learned this and how easy it can really be to activate this in your life and start to receive like future insight for your life, business strategies for your business, like help your kids even start hearing in this way. It's such a fun adventure to go on. And so we just want to invite you on that adventure. And we're going to talk about three primary ways, or I would say two are like very primary ways for a lot of people that you're actually probably already receiving insight in these ways, or intuition in these ways. And one kind of off the wall one. Okay. I want to share one off the wall one as well. So, and we'll share like just like practical exercises you can try, as well as some stories of just how this has functioned in our life.
And I would say my side of the story is that although I never questioned like God speaking to me, can God speak to me, all these different, intuition and gut checks and all those things, I never questioned it, but I also doubted myself, and I doubted, should I act on this? Is this me? Is this another voice? Is this God? Like, do I actually hear? Like, is this just as silly? Because if you get too much in your head, again, like Stephen talks about, like, I think you can overthink how simple this actually is. And once I learned to practice, because just like anything, the more you practice it, like I remember the first time I ever received a nice camera before we had started our wedding business. And what built my confidence was not reading the manual and getting all theoretical and all that. It was actually practicing, putting it into practice. And now, even to this day, even though I'm not a wedding photographer anymore, I can pick up a camera and be fully confident in any lighting situation, any scenario, because I built the muscle over and over and over again. And so it's just like this. Like, we want to give you practical tools to build that confidence. And I will say, as soon as I started to recognize where that intuition was coming from, and that it was God, and that it was wisdom, this has made us millions of dollars, I would say, just by acting on that alone. So
Yep.
if any of
Obedience.
this is like, I don't even know, just that alone, like you can make more money by listening to God and listening to that intuition. I'm not promising that's going to happen, but I'm just saying that's been my own thing. Or it not only has made us more money, it has made me be able to like know things and act on things. It saved us from things, or saved us from
100%.
painful certain situations. And I don't always get it 100% perfect, but I'm willing and I know what to recognize it.
You might see me writing down some stuff because I'm actually kind of following, I'm now I tell people I'm just always having two conversations. I'm here having this conversation, but I'm also kind of like being
Listening.
sensitive to the things that are coming to my mind. I was actually laughing during that because I remember when we started really practicing this, like you don't know unless you try. Like if you don't try this, then you don't know. And I remember we were in this season of like trying to activate this, and we were with our friend Mason at lunch, and like he was trying to what we were trying to do was get the server's name, the gal who was serving us food.
Yes, the server's name.
She didn't have a name tag or anything. And so he just went with the first thing that came to his head. He's like, hey, is your name Megan? I forget what the name actually was, but he's like, hey, this is super random, but like, is your name Megan? And she said, oh yeah, like
that
like,
is my name.
She just like confirmed it. And we were all so in shock that he got it that we didn't even know what to do next. Like, usually it's for a reason why you got something like that. And so, but we were literally just playing around, like playing a game, and he got it. And he was so in shock that he literally had nothing else to say after that. He was just like, she's like, how'd you know that? Like, and like, we just were all like, didn't know what to say. So I just share that, like, you can try this, you can make it a game. And as you step into it, you get more confident with it and you can start to lean on it more and actually trust it. So, okay, let's talk about that one right there. That story right there. I would say one of the main ways that people hear, again, you're going to develop a primary way. And what we believe is that actually all of our senses that we have are actually created as receptors to this like divine intuition. Okay. These messages from heaven, the messages from God, and actually all of our senses can be trained to receive. But you tend to have a primary one, and it's nice to have a primary one because it's one you can kind of fall back on, but it's also cool to train the other ones. And we'll talk about some of that because sometimes you're in an environment where it's hard to hear through your primary one. And so you can lean on some of those other ones you've trained. Okay. So the primary one that a lot of people hear through is what I would call auditory. Okay. It's auditory. And you hear people say this stuff all the time. So again, I'm going to totally demystify this. I heard God say this, right? Or they'll say like, and then God said to me this, right? Like, just like say it so casually. And like, I think when I was growing up, I just imagined this big booming voice
like,
or something.
How do you know? How would he do that? How would he choose you? There must be the other people that like are just
must be
so
so holy,
holy, so close to God that he would speak to you.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So
and
hard.
I think that, like religion just like funks it up. Okay. They add a little funkiness in there. But everyone can hear this way. And the thing is, like, God is like constantly speaking if you're willing to hear it. And so one exercise that really demystified this for me, someone walked me through this. They're like, hey, just say your name, like in your head on the count of 3, just say your name. So without saying it out loud, in your head, 1, 2, 3. Okay. I kind of like heard in my head, like my name, me saying my name in my head. That is exactly how it's going to sound when one of these things come to you. So when Mason, we were at lunch and he's like, hey, I wonder what her name is. And it came to his head, Megan. He just said that. And that was the thing. Okay. Now, a lot of people hear like this and they have these conversations going on in their head or they have a random thought or like, you ever have like you just think of a friend randomly, right? Like that is kind of that same area of the mind where you're hearing this thing. I'm hearing it, but I'm not hearing a big booming voice. We have friends who have heard voices, but a lot of times it's going to sound like you. And the reason is we believe that like we're made in God's image and that, for that reason, like we sound a lot like him. He sounds like a lot like us. So a lot of times people just get in their head though. And is it me? Is it just a random thought? And so you're just not going to know unless you try, you're just not going to know unless you try. If you've heard like the origin stories of Rainmakers, it came partly through a dream, but also partly through right here, like hearing something right there. And I had this kind of like, you're in the in-between state of waking up and you kind of have these like, is it a vision? Is it a dream? I don't really know. We have a whole episode on how to receive spiritual intuition from dreams. You can go check that out on the podcast. But I did hear in that moment, in that kind of same area, if you boil one noodle, it'll boil faster. Because I was having this kind of dream about a pot of noodles and there's all these noodles in the water. And it was like, if you boil one noodle, it'll go a lot faster. That was a clue, right? It was kind of a spiritual parable for what was going on in our life, where we had all these businesses, all these noodles in the pot trying to boil them. And we started to really focus on the one noodle of Rainmakers. And that's where we started to see that incredible growth. And so it came from that right there. So now that we've talked about this method of receiving, you may have already started to realize you're already getting things in this modality all the time. But you can practice this. And the best analogy that I've heard on how to dig out the gold, because you might just hear, oh, boil one noodle, right? And then you just leave it there, right? We call that first level revelation, right? Where it's just like you receive something and like it doesn't mean anything and you don't dig on it, right? But if you really want to get to heavy revy, okay, the heavy revelation of like what's the actual thing behind that, you got to ask questions, right? You like, God, I believe, is so relational. He wants to talk to you and he'll give you these little triggers, like this little thought that comes to your head or this little picture. We'll talk about that in a second. And if you just dismiss it, then you miss it. But if you dig into it, you ask questions around it. What about the noodle? Like, what about that? Why now? That's where you start to get the revelation and the spiritual insight. And so the best analogy I've heard around this is it's like a Kleenex box. You're often going to get just like the tip of the Kleenex. You're going to get a little, we call these triggers, or a little like, oh, I just noticed this thing. And you have to pull on it for more to be revealed. Jesus knew this super well. Like he said, those who have will have more in abundance, but those who have not, even that will be taken away. And so a lot of people say, I don't hear from God. I don't have dreams. And they use this lack focused language. And guess what? Then they don't. But if you say, I just have this little thing, I'm going to pull on it. I'm going to focus on what I have. I'm going to ask questions around it and kind of go with it. I'm going to trust it. Then you're going to receive so much more and there's abundance. And so that is a key principle. If you want to grow in this, is just like anything that like you start to see or grow or like try these things, just pull on it and see where it goes. Okay. So the first modality, I say like that's a primary for a lot of people, is that auditory. You got that? Number one, auditory. You're going to hear in that little space where you just say a phrase in your mind. It's going to sound just like that. Number two, and this is another common one. I feel like this one's really common for us. We're both very creative, very visual people. This is what we would call visual. Okay. Visual. I like to call this the canvas of your mind. And you might hear people say, I had a vision. I saw this thing. And sometimes people do have like these big open visions that like, it's like a movie screen in real life. I personally have not had that, and that's okay. But I want to demystify this so you can start being in abundance and actually what you are having. And so the thing to demystify this, the example I always go to is a piece of pizza. Can you envision a piece of pizza in your mind right now? Can you turn it around? Can you look even at the bottom of the pizza, right? Can you envision your childhood home? Can you see it in your head right now? That right there, wherever that's happening, that is the canvas of the mind. And that is the place that I believe God likes to paint pictures a lot. And Chelsey, I feel like you get stuff there all the time. We've even started to train our kids on this and actually done exercises with them to say like, hey, let's just imagine something in our head. Can we imagine this? Can we imagine that? Okay, now hand the pen up to God, or hand the pencil up to God, or hand the paintbrush up to God and wipe your slate clean. Like let him paint something. What does he paint? And the stuff my 4-year-old has said after we do the exercise with him truly has blown my mind, because he might not know the reason behind that thing, but it might speak directly to me or the business, or it might be just something so off the wall. I'm like, wow, like there is something happening here. I remember when I was training this and learning this, I was at my sister's house and they had this piano that was like given to them. But, I love playing the piano, but I love having a sustain pedal, right? The sustain pedal is really what makes it sound great, because you could blend the notes together. And they're like, oh yeah, the sustain pedal, it just never worked. And I was actually going through this season of learning spiritual intelligence. And so immediately I just kind of like, why doesn't it work? I just asked God a question, right? And in my mind, I saw in the back, just like in my mind, without even looking behind the piano, I was like, back left side, it's actually unplugged right here and it just needs to be twisted. Like I just like had it. It was just like I received it. And so I literally just reached back there. It's right there. And I twist the thing, right? And you might just say, oh, that's just intuition or that's just luck. But we've done this so many times. Like our lawn guy who mows the lawn, he lost his wallet. They came back to the house here. They're looking for his wallet. They're looking all over the place. Where's his wallet? Where's his wallet? And so once you learn that this is a skill set that you can develop, I just go, where's the wallet? And in my mind, I see it in their couch. I see like there's a picture of like a lazy boy recliner. It's like in the side. I'm like, have you checked? Go home and check like on the side of the couch. Like it's on the side of the couch. I think it's on the side of the couch. Just what I'm feeling. I'll use that language. I'm not gonna say I had a vision. Like I'm hearing from God because you're practicing. You might get it off, but I feel like it might be here. Go check there. They go home. There it is. It's right in the spot that I saw it in the canvas of my mind. Hey, Stephen here. Sorry to interrupt your show, but I have an important ask for you. We love making our decisions off of data, and your opinion really matters. We would love to hear from you. Like, what do you want to hear on this show? Chelsey and I want to make this the most amazing experience for you. So what are the topics that you want to hear about? What are the guests that you want to hear on? What are the trainings you want us to go deep on? Like, we want to hear from you. So there's a number right here, 530-298-0747. Text the word podcast to 530-298-0747. You'll get a little autoresponder and it'll say, hey, what do you want to hear from us? And then text us back what you want to hear. We are watching those. We're taking a look at those. And so we would love to hear from you. And maybe your topic will end up on a show coming up soon. All right, back to the show.
We talked about this on the first point, how oftentimes people say like, oh, I was reminded of you, or your name popped into my head. And that happens all the time for me. I'll have a friend come to mind, somebody I haven't talked to in years, or even a team member or one of our students, like their name will pop up. And I've just learned that over time when they pop up, and usually it will happen multiple times, like I'll forget about it, or it'll be during my day where I'm not able to like send an encouraging message, but I just want to be available to send those to people. So someone's name will pop into my head. And I'll just ask God, like, what's true about them? And I will then go and just send them an encouraging message. I don't know if you've ever just gotten a message from a friend like, hey, I've been thinking about you. How are you doing? It could be as simple as that. But I like to take it a little bit further. That's like God totally speaking to you. I don't think there's like coincidences, especially if that person's name comes up over and over again, which that's definitely happened to me. So I'll just send them like a quick audio message. And as I'm talking and maybe even just appreciating them for who they are, like, I just really appreciate how you're such a good friend. You know, you always encourage me. Oftentimes when I start speaking, I will get like a picture in my head, again, that canvas of your mind, like envisioning that pizza where they have places. I will get a picture of my friend and just like, hey, I see you running through this beautiful field with this dress and you just look so carefree and light and joyful. And I just really believe that this week you're going to have such a carefree, light week. And God just wants to encourage you in that. And I oftentimes will even just start out by saying like, isn't it so cool that God brought you to my attention, that God prompted me, like he loved you so much that he told me to reach out to you. Isn't that cool? Like I think that's cool every single time.
No, I think, if you can make this about other people, like I said, like we've saved money, we've made money doing like using spiritual intelligence because I feel like God cares about us. He cares about our business and what we're doing. So he's so good to give us messages. But making this about other people is a really fun way to practice. And I just always come in super humbly and just like, I'm learning this. So like, is it okay if I try this? Like, and I don't always use very God type language because sometimes with the type of people I'm talking to, that might not be something they can actually receive. And so one of these ways in this realm of like visual that like, I feel like God speaks to us so much in. And once you learn this, you're going to realize it's happening to you too, is people that remind us of other people. Okay. You ever see someone and they like, oh my gosh, it's like this person's doppelganger. Or maybe it's not even like if you put two photos of them up next to each other, they actually don't really look that alike. But there's something about them, like the way they smiled, or it's like, there's just something that like reminds you of this other person. You need to start asking about this one. If you get that, okay, you're in Starbucks line and the barista, you're like, oh my gosh, it reminds me of my sister. Ask God, what is true about my sister that is true about this person? And that thought that comes to your head. So now I'm using visual, but I'm also kind of using auditory, right? It might come visual, it might come auditory. But that thought that comes next, like there might be something there. And I've had this happen so many times where I'm like, hey, I don't know, like if this is true about you, but I sense that like, I don't know, are you trying to like, I feel like you have like a teaching gift and like you're really like in your heart or you're dreaming about being a teacher. Is that true? oh my gosh, like, how did
Mm.
you know that? Right. And often now, like, we have a whole opportunity to have a conversation where people are interested in learning more about this whole thing of spiritual intelligence. And so I've had that happen so many times. We had this guy, we were in church one day, and there was a guy sitting in front of us that I had never seen before. I'd never seen this guy before, but looking at the back of his head, you can't really see much, but he reminded me in my head of a skateboarder, professional skateboarder. And this professional skateboarder has been around the block. He's kind of like an OG, but he got majorly injured. And so the cool thing is God's going to speak your language. He's so personal to you. Like, I know about skateboarding. Chelsey doesn't know about skateboarding. If she saw this guy, he might remind her of someone completely different. And the thing is, this guy, when he turned around, he didn't look anything like this skateboarder, but I just know I started to learn this. So I started asking God, what is it about? And I just kept coming to that injury. And so sure enough, we kind of, service is ending at church. I see this guy kind of hightailing it out of there. And so I get up, this is scary, you guys. This is scary to try this thing, but like really, like if you frame it right, people are so open to it. I just think people were afraid to fail, and you have to take swings if you're going to hit home runs, right? Like if you just don't swing at any ball, you'll never learn. And so I went out.
Same thing goes at business. Yeah.
Hey man, before you go, like I know this is super random, and I'm totally just kind of learning this, but I feel like I'm learning to hear God's voice. And I don't always explain how I got to the thing. So I'm not like going into details of how I received the message, but I'm just like, hey, this is super random. But, and actually, as I started talking to him, I actually started to receive, I felt like exactly what it was. And so what came out next, and there was a couple things that led to this, but I don't tend to go into it. But basically I was like, I had no reason to earthly, humanly know this. Okay. But I said, hey, I know this is super random. I'm learning to hear God's voice. I was just sitting behind you, and I just sensed like, do you have like an injured shoulder? Like maybe it was like a skateboarding accident or something like that. So I just asked it in a very casual way. This dude's face goes like white. He's just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like years ago, I had a skateboarding accident. I hurt my shoulder. It hurts ever since. I ride my motorcycle up to work back and forth. And like my shoulder hurts like, like every single time. Now, why would God give that to me? Because he wanted to heal it. Okay. And so that's a whole nother conversation. But literally I had a friend with me. We prayed for this guy. His shoulder gets healed right then. And he goes off and he texts us later. I rode up to my job today. He was leaving church early to go to his job. No pain in his shoulder. This guy had pain for years, and God pointed it out. And then my obedience of actually stepping into it, like God encountered this guy. And so I know that story is like a little out there for some people listening to it, but there's usually a reason, right? There's usually a reason. This isn't just a game to like kind of like receive messages. Like these are for like, I feel like the reason is God wants to love on you, and he wants to love on the people around you. And if you want to have impact in your home, in yourself, and in the people around you, start listening to this stuff and start partnering with what's going on in that realm. And it's such a fun adventure.
All right. So just to recap, we have talked about hearing God through audio and then visual. And then there's one more we're going to talk about. And this one is all about taste and smell, which I personally haven't experimented with as much. That's not like one of my top senses. It's something though that I want to grow in.
So yeah, as we've been learning about this, I started learning all senses are receptors. But we often have these defaults that we can lean on: visual, auditory. Those are my defaults. That people that remind me of people thing. That one happens so much for me. So I always know I can go there. That's like a safe place for me. I've developed that. But like, I'm like, let's try to develop these other ones, because maybe I'm in a situation where I can't see. Maybe I'm in a situation where I'm in a loud concert, I can't hear. Right. So how do we develop these other ones? And so I was listening to a training on this, and they were like, okay, let's try taste. Okay. And so they're like walking you through it, and they're like, because I always thought like taste, like you would feel the actual taste in your mouth. And I think like, just like hearing and hearing an audible voice, some people have, but like oftentimes it's going to start really small. And so right now, as you're listening to this podcast, can you taste coffee? Maybe you like coffee, maybe you don't like coffee, but you can kind of taste that taste of coffee right now.
I want a coffee.
It's in your imagination, but you can kind of like, you almost can like taste it. What about feel? Can you like feel the weight of a cue ball in your hand from a pool table? Pick it up, feel it in your hand. Right? Like sand running through your fingertips. This is like, that's the area for when I say touch, like I felt the touch, or like I smelled something, right? Or I tasted something. It's going to happen in that like kind of faint area. It's not going to be as real as the real thing, but it's happening in that spiritual realm. Okay. So I'm in the plane, I'm listening to this training. I'm like, I pause it. You could do this right now. And I go, God, like, could you give me a taste right now? Like, I just want to hear from you in a taste. And immediately, you know, when you have like a sour candy and you're kind of like get that little pucker going on, like I tasted like a sour warhead in my mouth, you know, and I'm tasting it in that kind of like faint taste, or like we just talked about, like tasting coffee, tasting a sour warhead. But actually my body responded to that one because that's like a strong one. I kind of felt that. And then I asked, again, we pull on the Kleenex, like, okay, why? Like, why? And immediately I had a thought come to my head. And the thought was my dad. When I was a kid, I loved the sour warheads. We'd go to, you know, Chuck E. Cheese or whatever, play games, and I would get the sour warhead, right? Sour warheads. But the sour was so intense that I couldn't eat it myself. And so my dad would put the sour warhead in his mouth, and he would pucker up and take all that sourness. And then, I know this sounds gross, but he would give it to me. And all you parents know, like, you would totally do this as a dad, as a mom. And so my dad would take the sour and he'd give me the sweet. And in that moment, I actually started tearing up in the plane because we were going through something in our business that week that was pretty sour. Like, it was pretty like, oh, this thing is just kind of hard. And I felt like God was saying to me right there in that moment, son, like, I love you and I'm going to take the sour. You don't need to worry about it anymore. I'm going to give you the sweet. And it just brought so much peace to me. And I'm just so thankful for my dad for that memory. But God used it, right? He used the taste and he used the visual, right, to bring that memory to my mind, to speak a powerful message to me. So then I wasn't reactive in this sour situation that was happening. And then he totally brought sweetness. Like, by the end of the week, it was like this sweet thing that happened. And would I have acted that way if I didn't receive the spiritual intelligence? I don't know. I might have reacted to the sour and been sour back myself, or taken on the sour myself. And so we are sharing these things because this has had such an impact in our life. And where you're at on the scale of like, I'm super skeptical of this, or like, I don't even believe in this stuff. Like, I just encourage you, like, take one step. If there's something you see in our life that you're attracted to, something you see in our business that you're attracted to, this has been a core like thing we've developed that has given us the insight, the intuition, and the knowledge beyond us to get where we're at today. And so I'd encourage you, like, if there's anything in you drawn towards this, try one of these three things. Just try the exercise where you're like, hey, give me a vision. Give me, like, I want to, like, send me a song right now into my head. Right. Or like, I want to taste something right now. I want to feel something, right? Just choose one, try it, and just have a moment. And whatever that thing as it comes to you, start digging on it. You might not get heavy revy right away, but you might have a thing. And then over the next week, it reveals itself to you. Over the next year, it reveals itself to you. And we've had things like this, and it's so impactful. So if this is helpful for you, we would love to hear. If you're listening to this episode, someone needs to see this, hear this, share this on social media and tag us at Steez Diaz, at Chels_Diaz, at the Rainmaker family. We would love to see what episodes you're resonating with, what episodes are having impact in your life, because we share all types of topics from wealth building to time freedom to generational abundance, even topics like this that are a little out there, but have been such a key for us. So if you're resonating with this one, share it, tag us so we know to do more stuff like this. And thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Rainmaker Family Show.
All right. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rainmaker Family Show. If you're not a part of our mastermind yet, I want to say I think you're missing out. Our heart here at Rainmaker is to create total abundance for you. That's why we're offering a free one-on-one family freedom design session for you, our faithful listener.
Yeah, if you want to hop on a call with our team, see if it's a good fit to build a business that creates time freedom for you, financial abundance, and helps you leave that thriving family legacy. That's what we're all about in our mastermind. You can grab a time on our team's calendar at rainmakerfamily.com/mastermind. Again, that's rainmakerfamily.com/mastermind.